we have to predict the question. Use the choices. What do they indicate here? They indicate that we're testing punctuation. That's pretty obvious. But here's a great example where you can't just go with like, oh, this word always gets a comma or this word doesn't get a comma. No, that's not what commas do. That's not how commas operate. There are not certain words that always get a comma or don't. There are words that usually get a comma, but the SAT is known for picking the situations that break what our expectations are. And so something that usually gets a comma might not get a comma on an SAT question. So the better strategy here is to know that when they test punctuation, what they're really testing is sentence structure. So we need to use these commas and think, okay, what are they doing? What purpose do they serve? A comma is not just a pause. It's a way of breaking apart a sentence and inserting extra pieces and shifting around. And so we want to understand what is the main sentence here. What is the role of the commas if they need to be there? How are they shifting the sentence for us? So let's take a look. A goat ingests the vegetation particular to the meadow in which it grazes, which, along with other environmental factors such as altitude and weather, shapes the cheese's texture and taste and texture. So what's my main sentence? A goat ingests the vegetation particular to the meadow in which it grazes. That's my main sentence. Okay, so that's. If I put a period right there, I'd be good. I have a complete idea that's grammatically correct. But instead of a period, they put a comma. And so what they're doing next is they're including an extra clause, and which is the kind of word that typically gets a comma. So this shouldn't be surprising, and that's because which is used to add on extra stuff. Now, notice though, we do have the word which earlier in this sentence without a comma. So this is what I mean, in certain words we associate with commas, but they don't always get them. So we have to pay attention to how the word is being used. So there's another comma after the word which. And what that means is we have a break again. So we have another kind of addition to the sentence. And it's kind of like a break within a break. And this is where the SAT loves to kind of just like mess with us because they know we're getting lost in all these commas and all these clauses. So we want to kind of focus on the word which here. Where does that pick up, right? So there's a break and we're going to leave the sentence and we need to see where this picks up. So a goat ingests the vegetation particular to the meadow in which it grazes, which shapes the cheese's taste and texture. Okay, right? So let's skip all that stuff I didn't highlight. A goat ingests the vegetation particular to the meadow in which it grazes, which shapes the cheese's taste and texture. Again, that's kind of a complete idea. Notice how skipping all that extra stuff, I still have a complete kind of thought. It's got an extra clause at the end in pink, but that extra clause is kind of self-contained. It kind of gets a point across. So what is this other piece doing? Well, this word along is the start of, like I said, another interruption, another extra thing in this sentence. So we need to see, okay, of this underlined stuff, what goes with it? What is the real interruption here? So, along with other environmental factors such as altitude and weather. So here's the deal. This piece, let's go to there, is absolutely a clause. So I could say, just to add in more stuff, a goat ingests the vegetation particular to the meadow in which it grazes, which, along with other environmental factors, shapes the cheese's taste and texture. Notice how we're slowly adding pieces in, okay? So if we did that, what would happen? Well, that would mean that we would need a comma right here. Let's use red to make it really clear. And that comma would show me that this unhighlighted part is itself also a clause that gets inserted. So it would be let me pick another way to highlight this. We've got the blue, which is an extra piece, which is attached to the green, which is an extra piece which interrupts the pink, which is an extra piece that attaches to the yellow. So it's a blue is attached to the green, which interrupts the pink, which is attached to the yellow. It's a mess. So if I wanted to do that, I could do that, right? So that's one way of punctuating this sentence. So let's look at our answer choices. So we have some commas that we want, right? We have a comma after factors, and after whether, right there. So that looks pretty good. So this one's weird, right? C has a comma in the middle of that blue, and I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to break that up. That's not where we would want to put that comma. And the original, kind of just want to make sure I didn't blot anything out here, the original doesn't have any commas at all. So to me, honestly, like that's a case where maybe I think if you were writing an essay and I were grading it and you didn't put any commas there, I would kind of be okay with it. But we're not really... that might just be me being okay with it. Like that's not necessarily what the grammar rule is here. The real issue is what are these commas doing and what are they breaking up? So if we picked choice D, we'd have a problem because there's no comma at the end. So we'd have this interruption leading us into the blue, but we need another comma showing us that the blue has ended and we're returning to something else. So that's the issue here. So let me pick, or let me get rid of D. Now, I actually misspoke. Here's the reason that choice A is wrong. It's tricky. B is one way of understanding this sentence, right? So there's a yellow, a pink, a green, and a blue, and they're all kind of nested within each other. And the commas on either side of such and whether let us say that that blue is distinct from the green and the pink that are around it. Okay. That is not the only way of thinking about the blue. If you didn't put a comma after factors, what you'd be suggesting is that such as altitude and weather is not a separate piece. It's just more green. And that's fine. You can do that. That's okay. That's why I said I wouldn't have marked you wrong. But here's the thing. Notice that even if you include the such as piece as part of the green, and we say we don't need a comma to interrupt and to kind of show the switch, we still do need a comma right here to show that we're switching back from the green to the pink. So that comma is not here in choice A, right? Choice A is no commas whatsoever. And so that's a problem, because if we did that, we don't really have any way of showing our reader that we're going from this green, which we entered right here, after which, and we need something to show the reader that we're getting back to the pink that we left before, the pink that we interrupted. And so choice A does not have that comma. So what that means is that, kind of something we've seen in other punctuation questions, there are multiple ways sometimes to use commas in a sentence and to break apart a sentence and to show things that are interruptions or not interruptions, and there's multiple ways to do that. And then when you are writing your own essays, you'll have those kinds of choices. But here we have to kind of stick with the options that we're given. And so the comma here after factors is optional. We could put it there, we could not put it there. We have a choice as a writer whether or not to make that an interruption and to suggest that such as altitude and weather is its own thing. But no matter what choice we make there, we do not have a choice with the comma after weather. That comma must be there because we made a choice earlier on, right here after which. And that choice has some consequences. And that consequence is that we're going to need to shift back into the pink after we're done with this green, or after we're done with the green and the blue, whichever way we want to think about it, we have to shift back into pink. And so that comma is required. And no choice includes that comma and also includes the one after factors, right? So there's a lot of choices that come close, but only choice B gives us a valid way of punctuating this sentence. A valid way of many ways, of a couple ways, but it's the only one that's valid that we have to choose from. This is tricky. This is really hard So hopefully all the highlighting helped. If it was confusing for you, that's okay. This is a hard question. This is unlikely to come up again. You're going to see lots of different ways that they ask for commas. This one is just kind of like a perfect storm of difficult things. So it's a low priority. There are much more important things to note about commas, and we've hit some of them. And I do think the main takeaway then for you is just that a comma indicates a break in a sentence, a place where things shift. So you're not going to be allowed highlighters on the SAT, but if you can kind of start to do what I did here in your own head and think about how a sentence is constructed. What's the main piece? What gets added on? How many layers are there to the sentence? That's when you can start to make decisions with certainty about whether a comma belongs in a certain spot. And there might be a case where you have to put a comma somewhere where you yourself would not put one, but because of other commas, you have no choice and you have to put it there. So that's important. It's not always what you would do, it's what we're forced to do based on what this writer chose, right? So make sure that you are thinking about the other decisions that have been made in the sentence when you make your decision about the choices. That's tricky to do, but it's really important for these hard ones.